The Trump peace agreement has produced a ceasefire and a partial Israeli pullback, yet its success rests on four fragile pillars: enforceable timelines, credible aid flows, a real alternative to Hamas inside Gaza, and Netanyahu's willingness to trade tactical freedom for strategic stability. Right now, all four are wobbling. So on the 9th of October, Israel's cabinet approved a ceasefire pathway that the White House framed as the first step in a 20-point plan. The scheme leaves the IDF in control of a large swathe of Gaza at the outset, then later withdraws contingent on security benchmarks and the handover of responsibilities to an international stabilization force. Analysts estimate the initial footprint at roughly 60% of the Strip. Aid is the test that tells no lies. 1 week into the ceasefire, the UN World Food Programme reports roughly 560 tons of food entering Gaza daily. That is progress, but not remotely enough. And access to the north remains severely constrained because the Zikim and the Eretz crossings are shut and roads are cratered. Only 13 of 36 hospitals are even partially functioning, and infectious disease is surging. Compounding this, Israel has told the UN it will allow only about 300 trucks per day, half the figure initially discussed after the ceasefire, citing delays by Hamas in returning hostages' remains. Rafah's reopening is something to be announced, and Israel says aid will not pass through it when it does reopen. The result is queues of trucks and warehouses full of food and medicine that cannot be pushed forward. The plan forbids annexation or reoccupation, but is notably hazy on verification of Hamas disarmament and on the sequencing of later IDF pullbacks. That vagueness is not academic. It creates a ready pretext for one side to say the other has failed to comply, and for the ceasefire to degrade by attrition. Even sympathetic policy shops caution that the plan's prospects hinge on tangible services, security, and a credible political horizon for Palestinians. Netanyahu could have declared victory months ago with a day-after plan of his own. He didn't, and that vacuum drew Washington back into dictating pace and choreography. Trump's team now wants a structured transition, but the Prime Minister still prizes operational latitude. When push comes to shove, he has repeatedly prioritized freedom of action over diplomatic optics. That pattern explains why outside observers warn that the hard work starts after the photo ops end. Hamas is weaker now, but still dangerous. Yes, the regional balance has shifted. Hezbollah was battered into a ceasefire. Iran is more isolated after this summer's strikes, and key Hamas military figures have been removed. That pressure helped pry open concessions that were unthinkable a year ago, including Hamas accepting an eventual non-Hamas force in parts of Gaza. But where Hamas still holds turf, it is reasserting coercive control, and as long as it functions as the de facto security provider, reconstruction and normalization will stall. The international stabilizing force is the keystone, and yet it is not built. Trump's blueprint imagines a Muslim-majority ISF stepping in as the IDF steps back. And the politics are elegant on paper and ugly in practice. Who supplies troops, under what terms, rules, with what mandate to confront spoilers, and how does this force respond if Israel conducts cross-border action citing imminent threats? The unanswered questions are precisely what tend to sink missions of this kind. Spurious regional think tanks are publicly urging the White House to lock those answers before momentum bleeds away. Humanitarian access is not charity, it's strategy. The WHO warns of diseases spiraling out of control, which is exactly how vacuums are filled by armed actors. The WFP says the volume today is a trickle when a flood is needed. If the North continues to starve while trucks idle at borders, you can see the ceasefire corrode from the edges inward. The moral case and the strategic case are the same. 4 tests will decide whether this peace holds. The timeline clarity within days, not weeks. The parties need a dated schedule for staged IDF area handovers tied to independently verified benchmarks on weapons caches and tunnel demolition. Ambiguity here invites bad faith. There need to be corridor guarantees. Northern access requires a protected logistics model, escorted convoys, pre-cleared routes, predictable inspection windows, and a minimum daily truck floor that cannot be unilaterally halved. Right now, the capricious throttling from 600 to 300 trucks is a tripwire. The ISF credibility contributors need announcing, mandate, and command architecture needs to be in place in public with a precise mission timetable and a handover plan but from the IDF. Anything fuzzier becomes a magnet for spoilers, and even a modest conditional pathway for Palestinian self-government in Gaza and a halt to land grab dynamics in the West Bank are necessary to keep regional partners at the table. Without that, the Gulf will hedge and the plan will thin out. So what to watch this week is, does Rafah get a date, and does Israel stick to the line that no aid will pass there? If yes, can Kerem Shalom and Kisufim scale to the required volume with northern corridors still shut? Do daily truck counts climb back towards 600? Does the UN confirm the flows, or do we find ourselves stuck again at 300 with rolling justifications tied to hostage remains? Do we see a joint communique naming ISF contributors, rules of engagement and a deployment window? Does Trump sustain attention beyond the ribbon-cutting stage? The week of the 14th of October, he declared the war over. Experts applauded the silence of the guns, but warned that the structural work begins now. If the White House goes cold, the plan goes cold too. This is not 2017. The map is different. The regional incentives are different, and Hamas has yielded on points it swore it never would. That is why it's possible to get to yes, but Israel and Hamas cannot improvise their way from a fragile ceasefire to a durable order without enforceable timelines, guaranteed humanitarian corridors, and named and steady stabilization force in a political horizon. The agreement will at best freeze an unjust status quo and at worst collapse back into war. In plain terms, the guns are quiet because of a plan that everyone can describe. Peace will only hold if there is a plan that everybody can execute.